So this is the second Wednesday evening, reading this text which is in front of you, the three principles of the path, written by this great 14th century Tibetan master, Geshe Tashi. And as I briefly mentioned last Wednesday evening, the text is written by this great 14th century master, Tibetan great master, and yeah, it's all right. A little bit not too high. Yeah, that's fine. And it is written to one of his main followers, disciples, who was also a great Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And the nature of the text is very much written in that kind of background. So therefore, the people who are relatively new in the teachings of the Buddha, you may find quite difficult to follow, the text itself, and when I give some comments on the text. And what I'll do, and which I started last Wednesday evening, I will try to follow close to the text instead of diluting the nature of the text. And so that should be set at the beginning of the class. Making sure our intention being here and to join the meditation, listening to the talk, contemplation, and some recitations, and join with these activities with a positive mind, positive thought, intention, will make huge difference, not only during the class, but also after the class. If you have a positive the intention to join the class, the impact will last for positive impact will last for long time, and not just to ourselves, but also to others, the coming generations, and not just human beings, but also other living creatures. So therefore, try all our best to have a positive intention, mind, to join the class. A positive intention from our heart, there can be a very simple, straightforward, positive mind, or it can be philosophically, spiritually motivated positive intention. And that's up to the individuals. What is useful and helpful is to hold, to experience that positive mind, from our heart, and not in a form of mimicking, not in a form of being said so to have that, not in that way, but very sincerely and very genuinely from our heart. And that way, regardless of whether there's a profound philosophical reasons or profound spiritual reasons or not, if that positive mind is a genuine, sincere from our heart, that will make huge difference. So try all our best to start the gathering with a positive intention. And then people who like to join with me, reading the Refuge and the Bodhicitta lines, that is on the prayer book, page 27, do so. This reading is not compulsory. It is those people who are already following the teachings of the Buddha. For those people holding these two minds, the mind taking refuge in three jewels, and the altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta, those two minds as the main intentions, main sort of positive minds, being here and to join the class. So we are going to read those 4 lines together 3 times. Sanje chöda tsoji chonam la chanju pado dane japso che dage chöshe jibe tsonam ji dola penje sanje doba sho sanje chöda tsoji chonam la chanju pado dane japso che dage chöshe jibe tsonam ji dola penje sanje doba sho sanje chöda tsoji chonam la chanju pado dane japso che dage chöshe jibe tsonam dola penje sanje doba sho. Oh, yeah. So with this positive and constructive mind to start the class, now we will do a brief silent meditation. And the purpose of this meditation is simply to enhance, to nurture a calm, clear, and focused mind which has the qualities of stillness, that is, that our minds have the ability to stay with one given meditation object. That can be your natural breathing or image of Buddha, whatever object that you like to choose, that have the ability to stay with it. And that is the meaning of stillness, stability. And while there is a stillness, stability, then enhance, nurtured clarity, mental quality of clarity, Clarity in the sense, the full awareness, the full complete attention, full attention is present while the mind is with the object of the meditation. So to cultivate, to enhance these two mental qualities, stillness and the clarity, in order to experience a calm, clear, and focused mind, we will do this brief, about 8-9 minutes silent meditation. Start the meditation. Initially, particularly people who are relatively new in the meditation, first, have a comfortable, right sitting posture, body posture which has a structure, such as your back is straight, yet it is completely relaxed. All the joints, muscles, the limbs are completely relaxed. So have that kind of comfortable sitting posture. When you have found that kind of body posture, then gently start to enhance the stillness, then the clarity. When these two the mental qualities are present, then just your mind stay or abide with those two qualities, and through that experience a calm, clear, and a focused mind. Oh, yeah. As I briefly mentioned earlier, the nature of the text is and how it is written, and to whom it is written, and by who it is written. The people who are relatively new in the teachings of the Buddha, you may find not that easy to follow. Because of the background of the text. And as the text itself is entitled or called the three principles of the path, the teachings that the historical Buddha taught, particularly from the Mahayana teachings, Mahayana traditions point of view, the historical Buddha Gautama taught, many different topics, many different his followers, and in many different occasions after his enlightenment, almost more than 40-something years. And according to the Mahayana traditions, all those teachings can be, teachings are put into three categories, categories. They are called three turnings of the will of the Dharma, will of the teachings, three turning of the will of the teachings of the Dharma. And this, the first turning of the will of the Dharma, and the second and the third turning of the will of the Dharma. I'm talking about according to the Mahayana traditions. Theravadan traditions may not divide or may not put into these three categories. There are many different ways to put the Buddha's the teachings into different categories, like saying the three baskets. That is according to the both traditions, Theravadan tradition as well as Mahayana traditions. Entire Buddhist teachings are put into another three sort of groups. That is according to the subject matter. According to the subject matter, they're saying the basket of the concentration, the basket of the ethics, and the basket of the wisdom. So entire Buddhist teachings, the historical Buddhist teachings, put into these three, the categories, and that is what quite often translated, saying the three baskets. But in here, that's what I've just what I'm talking about. Here, the three groups or three categories are called three turning of the will of the Dharma. And this is mainly, this explanation is found in the Mahayana traditions. And the first turning of the will of the Dharma, that, in that group, it is called first, second, and third. First, second, and third, not necessarily chronological, according to the chronological. It is just how they are put it, name first, second, and third turning of the will of the Dharma. The group, the teachings that in the first turning of the will of the Dharma is very much the topic out of the three principal aspects of the path, very much in this first principle of the path, out of the three, the text that we are reading. Those teachings in that first category, in the first, those teachings are very much focused on the individual's individuals dealing with, working with their own, what you call the mental states, enhancing their own those, the useful, helpful, constructive mental states, and also, dealing with, working with, the reducing, minimizing, and eventually completely eradicating those unhelpful, the unhealthy mental states, and that is which we are going to read today. There are one or two verses in relation to that, that part of the. And the second and the third turning of the will of the Dharma, is very much focused on this, the next two principles of the path, of the path. And in this second and third turning of the will of the Dharma, out of those three categories, the main explicit topic, explicit subject matter is on emptiness, on emptiness, which is the third principle of the path that we are going to read next week. And the implicit topics, implicit subject matter in the second and third turning of the will of the Dharma is very much focused on today's our reading. Also, hopefully we are able to read a few verses from the second principle of the path from this text, and that is cultivation of the altruistic awakened mind, or in Sanskrit it is called bodhicitta, which is a unique teachings, unique practice in the Mahayana traditions. In the Mahayana traditions, the first, the principle of the path, which we briefly look at last Wednesday, and also we're going to look at today, technically called renunciation, or I call it determination to be free from dukkha and the origins of the dukkha, suffering and the origins of the suffering. That is the first principle of the path out of the three, and that is common practice, and that is common teachings, common in the sense that those teachings are available in the Theravadan tradition as well as in the Mahayana traditions. In that sense, out of the three principles of the path, the first principle of the path, technically called renunciation, which is the common, the principle of the path to be practiced, to be cultivated, to be enhanced, developed, and the second principle of the path, which is called bodhicitta, or the altruistic awakened mind, that is a unique teachings, unique practice in the Mahayana tradition, in the Mahayana teachings. Then third principle of the path, which is realization of emptiness, in certain extents, the Theravadan as well as Mahayana, they share the topic, the subject, but in the Mahayana teachings, there are further interpretation, the further explanation on this subject, on emptiness, or sometimes is called selflessness, anatma in Sanskrit, shunyata in Sanskrit, and translated in emptiness. So that is just briefly relate the three principles of the path that we are reading from based on this text. Try to trace back according to the Mahayana traditions, trace back to their origins, where Buddha taught, where the historical Buddha taught these three principles of the path. And first, second, and third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, we will find the sources of these, these three principles of the path. So that's something just, to start, as a general, the comments on the. So last Wednesday, we covered, the up to verse, up to verse end of verse 3, and okay, yeah. So the first verse, as we know, is just to cover the writer is explaining briefly, giving a summary of the three principles of the path, and then saying, I'm going to write this text as much as I can, in a sense of giving his sort of his character, and following some of the great Indian traditions, and the second verse is very much people who are going to read, people who are going to listen, people who are going to study, people who are going to contemplate the meaning of the text, what kind of attitude, what kind of mindset they should, with that kind of mindset or the attitude, they should listen, read. In that way, they will get the maximum benefits. As I mentioned at the beginning of this evening gathering, having a positive mindset at the beginning of any kind of event that we engage in at the beginning of the day. And it is similar to here, under the heading of persuading to listen. It is, more or less persuading the listen in the sense, to listen, to read, to study, to contemplate, to meditate on these topics, with that kind of particular mental state, which will be, very useful and helpful. When it says, those who are not attached to the pleasures of, the cycling or pleasures of just this lifetime's, activities. Although it is important to enjoy, the happiness, the joys, the fulfillments that we have, that we experience, but attaching to them or craving, clinging on them is not helpful. So without that kind of mind to study, who strive to make freedom and endowments meaningful. Also, not only, not to have that kind of strong attachment to these lives, those, the joys and happiness, but also have the strong will or strong determination, the determination to utilize this human existence, the human life that we have, human life which is extremely rich, very sophisticated, emotionally and intellectually, extremely capable, mentally, and that's what here saying freedom and endowments. The freedom in the sense many of the the things that we can do on this human mind and body, particularly on this human using this human existence, and so on and so forth. So to want to through that recognition, through that acknowledgement, realizing the human life that I have, although it's not completely perfect, but based on this human existence, I can do something extremely meaningful, helpful, useful to myself and to others, not only the next few years, next few decades, but for long term, my own well-beings and well-beings for many living beings, for many generations, many lifetimes, people who believe there's a life after death. And so that sort of having that kind of understanding, and with that understanding have that kind of yearning or strive to utilize the human existence in a more productive, more meaningful purpose, in that sort of another sort of positive mental state, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the victorious ones. They have a tremendous sense of the trust, or in trust in the sense, as I mentioned the last Wednesday evening, with the understanding the teachings of the Buddha and the subsequent those great Buddhist teachers. And then really with that understanding, then engage, follow, apply those teachings, and then say, you fortunate ones, people who have that sort of, these kind of mental states, can think oneself as a fortunate ones, have that kind of mindset. And then, with that kind of mindset, listen, contemplate, read, meditate, put into practice. And this second verse is very useful, not only at this sort of, not only just this text, but also in general. In general, when we, to how to structure our mental states, in our daily lives, and very useful, advice. So then the text itself, start main bodies. That the first two verses are more like a, the general, explanation. The main text start from verse 3, and verse 3, is very much, why it is so important. Why it is so important to have that determination, that first principle of the path, the first principle of the path, which is technically called renunciation, or determination to be free from, determination to be free from suffering and the origins of suffering. So this verse 3, is to explain that kind of determination is important. That kind of determination is important because now here, that is, the historical Buddha, as I mentioned earlier, had taught many layers of teachings. Some teachings are simply to, to relieve some of temporary difficulties, or to enhance some of temporary happiness and joys. Some of the teachings are given for the long-term benefits. People who are interested not only right here and now, but what in Tibetan we call misi tenji duma. Tenji duma, that is important one. Tenji duma, that means something long-term well-being, long-term well-being. Of course, day to day, year, month after month, year after year, decades after decades, our well-being is important. But also, as a human beings, it is also equally important to set for the long-term well-beings, the well-beings of oneself and also well-beings of the many living creatures. And to that kind of people who are in that kind of interest, have that kind of interest, something for long term, then the first principle of the path, the renunciation or that determination to be completely to be free from suffering and the origins of suffering is important. Without that kind of determination, the long-term, the well-being will not achieve or will not get, will not obtain. So therefore, right at the beginning, while making day-to-day lives, day-to-day activities and lives, making comfortable, enjoyable, the useful and helpful. Same time, along that, having something long-term, securing long-term well-being is also important. And that's where the Buddha, the historical Buddha, had taught the teachings in many different layers. And here we are talking about to the people who are interested, not only here and now well-beings, but also the well-beings of the long term. And to those people, then this, what you call the having, determination or renunciation is crucial. And this is what this verse 3 is, I will read. You have this translation. There are slightly different translation. It is same, but I will use slightly different translation. Okay. Here it says this: without pure renunciation. I'm reading slightly different. You can read this one. You have the. Without pure renunciation, there's no way to pacify attraction to the pleasurable effects of the ocean of cyclic existence. So this, without that kind of determination to be completely free from, not just the gross pain and difficulty, but completely free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha, then you will not be completely free from this conditioned existence which is the result of the afflictions and actions committed under those afflictions, such as attachment, aversion, and ignorance, which are the afflictions, and actions, activities that our body, speech, and mind have engaged in, with that motivated or led by these three poisons, these three afflictions, then the result will be constantly the difficult challenges, the dissatisfactions, and so forth. And we will not be, even though temporarily, even though superficially, we may free from some of the gross challenges, difficulties, and sufferings, but without that kind of determination, we will never going to be free from the root of the challenges or the difficulties. And that's what this the verse is. And then it says, for the attachment to cyclic existence completely binds all beings, therefore seek renunciation at the beginning. And in other words, encouraging. If people who are really seeking that kind of long-term freedom from suffering and the origins of suffering, then really seek or search for or cultivate, develop, enhance the determination, have that determination, to be completely free from suffering and the origins of suffering, or in other words, have that renunciation. And that is what this first verse is more like why it is important and encouraging, to enhance that kind of determination. Now then the next verse, the next verse give us, how to do that. Then how to cultivate, this determination. How to cultivate this determination. And the first two lines help us, the something, what here it says in our text that you have, freedom and endowment are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. In other words, this first in Tibetan, first two lines, and extremely, what you call the powerful statements. So the people who have realized, who have noticed this human existence, although it's not perfect, although it's not free from, the challenges, difficulties, the pains, but still it is extremely, what you call the capable, extremely have a great potential, particularly, to enhance some of these amazing mental states, such as love, compassion, altruism, wisdom, and so forth. So people who have realized this human existence, here the term is used, freedom and endowment, which we saw earlier, who have realized that, then same time, this human existence, which has great potential, which has great capability, but it will not last forever. Very difficult to, have this kind of human existence, in the future. Not that easy, because the reason is, all the things and events, coming to being dependent on causes and conditions. In order to have this kind of human existence that we have, right here and now, we have to create the causes. Without causes, that this kind of human existence will not have again. Of course, if we created the causes, we'll have. And the result concords with the causes. With the causes. What kind of result that we would like to have, it depends on what kind of causes that we have created. And therefore, to have this kind of the human existence, which has a tremendous potentials, values, capability, we have to create the causes again to have that. And that is not easy to create that kind of causes. So in Tibetan it says, Teljor, that means freedom and endowment, or in what I have used, this tremendous potential human existence is not easy to obtain again and again, because the causes are not easy to create it. And what we have right here and now also will not going to last forever. When we contemplate on these points, again and again and again. What that contemplation will do, that contemplation will reduce grasping, craving, clinging, attachment to these lives, those meaningless affairs, those meaningless activities. The activities, affairs, the things and events that we spend lots of our times, energies, and resources, to have, to obtain, to have it. And if we really, initially to understand the human existence, this human existence has a tremendous, it is extremely rich, it is extremely, have a great potential and so forth, and it will not last that long. And once it is lost, this kind of human existence is not easy to be obtained. And then when that kind of understanding, realization is, become part of our way of thinking, then that will help to reduce attachment to the meaningless affairs in this lifetime, this life's activities. And that's what these first two lines are, helping us. And here in this, the different translation, it says this: familiarizing your mind with the leisure and endowments that are difficult to find, and in life life there is no time to waste. So you reverse the familiar. Yeah. So the so what that will do, that contemplation, and that is really the important part here. In another teachings, the Sajja tradition, out of the 4 Tibetan Buddhist, schools traditions, Sajja tradition, they have a very nice expressions. The teaching itself is called Shenpa Shitao. Shenpa Shitao. The freeing oneself from 4 graspings or 4 attachments. The 4 attachments. And this first one is exactly, out of the 4, freeing ourselves from 4 attachment. This is the first one. Ourself freeing from attached to this life's meaningless affairs. I'm not talking about all our activities. As I mentioned already several times, we should enjoy this life's activities. We should enjoy whatever, but attaching on this, grasping, craving, clinging to these lives, those meaningless affairs, is not going to do anything good for ourselves and also for others. And how to reduce that attachment in this particular teachings from this great teacher, Tsongkhapa, saying if we contemplate, if we meditate, or if we familiarize ourselves with this understanding of the human existence has a tremendous potential. It will not last forever. Once it is lost, not easy to be obtained. And of course, this explanation is particular. The last point is done. In the believing there will be many lives in the future. In that context, not to be found again easily, and that will reduce that attachment, and very useful. And in this Sajja tradition, they said, "Tsedila" in Tibetan, "Tsedila shena chobamin." So, in other words, if we are strongly attached to these lives, those meaningless affairs, then it is very, very difficult for us to have a proper Dharma practice, proper genuine Dhamma practice. If we are strongly, extremely attached, crave to the pleasures, the joys, happiness of this lifetime. I'm using this particular qualification extremely. In other words, you will be disappointed. So that is really important. Then next two lines in the same verse. So now then the next two lines are the saying, in here in your translation, the translation that we all share, it is put into two verses. But in Tibetan, there's only one verse, and here to get more meaning, put into two verses. You can see it under the verse 4, which is there are two verses, but in Tibetan there are only one verse, 4 lines. First 2 lines are focus on not to extremely attach to this lifetime, and that way we will reduce grasping to this life's affairs, and that is the first 2 lines. And the last 2 lines, lende melo kowe dongenam yang samna chime na shendo. Thinking about, contemplating, meditating on the cause and effect, particularly in this case, cause and effect, the inner cause and effect. Inner in the sense the activities, the living beings' activities which are committed, which are created with a will, with the intention, and these are the causes. These actions are the causes. Of course, many of these the intentions are somewhere, one way or another, directly or indirectly, at our level, are led by these 3 poisons, as I mentioned earlier, the attachment, aversion, and the ignorance, led by those, and we act. And these actions have results, consequences, and that is inner law of cause and effect. Inner in the sense, related to the living beings' activities, and the living beings' activities which are, led by intention or the will, and many of our intention or the will are directly or indirectly related to these 3 poisons, and those are the causes, and then the actions, and our actions of the body, speech, and mind, and these are the causes, and the results. Results are the results related to those actions, and this is called inner law of cause and effect, or sometimes the term is used karma. The karma, that is the actions, mainly refers to the actions, led by these 3 poisons, and the results, and this is what here referring to. And in our reading, the text that you have in front, in the second, under the verse 4, when it says, by thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying. Unbetraying in the sense, as long as if we have created the causes, the results are definite. As long as if we haven't created the causes, we will not experience the results. And that is the meaning of, here how it translated saying unbetraying. In other words, never going to sort of, mismatch. Mismatch in the sense, have not created causes, but still experience the results, or created the causes but not experience the results. That is not going to take place. This is not something, the rule or the law is not something created by the Buddha. It is some form of natural law. And as we can see externally, how things and events come into being, come into existence, the dependent arising, dependently originated, all the things and events coming into being dependent on the causes, conditions, and other factors. And it is the same, our inner world, including our, the experience of pain and pleasure. And that's what here this second, the last two lines in this verse. And also because when you start to see, when you start to understand this chain, the chain of cause and effects. For example, in this lifetime, in my case, while I am experiencing, the result of the previous, the causes and the conditions, while I'm doing that, while I'm experiencing that, same time, I'm creating the causes in coming decades or coming lives to experience the results of, and it is not just one sort of chain, but many different chains of causes and effects are rolling like this. And that's why in Sanskrit, it is that kind of, circle, that kind of continuation is called samsara, or quite often translated in English saying cyclic existence, that kind of, rolling continuation of birth, aging, sickness, and death. While individual is in that, in that sort of these four major events, same time individual is creating to experience similar sort of events in the coming lives and life after that. And that's what here, so in other words, this last two lines saying, reflect on that, that kind of, the chain of cause and effects, then you will have the determination, determination completely free from, the dukkha and the origins of dukkha. And this is what this verse 4 is, so it is in a brief verse, just in 4 lines. First 2 lines, reflecting on the human potential, human existence. It is rare, not easy to obtain again. Reflecting on that, reducing this lifetime, reducing the attachment to this lifetime's meaningless activities, affairs, and then moving further, reflecting on this ongoing, continuation of this kind of, chain of birth, aging, and sickness and death, reflecting on that nature, then developing complete freedom from the suffering and the origins of suffering. And that is here this first out of the 3 principles of the path, the first principle of the path, which is explained in this one verse. But in a more detail, if you reflect on the Buddha's first teachings, on the Four Noble Truths, First 2 noble truths, noble truth of suffering and noble truth of origins of suffering, not something outside there,
or not something it's happening to the others, not in that form of reflection. Reflect on those first two noble truths, the teachings that Buddha had given. Reflect upon one's own this life, right here and now, dukkha, suffering. There are many different layers of suffering going on. We are only notice only those gross sufferings, mentally as well as physically. Only those gross sufferings are acknowledged, and we try to search solution to overcome. We are not hardly aware of those subtle sufferings. In a certain extent, instead of recognizing those subtle sufferings as sufferings, we may see them as some sort of desirable, some sort of something that we like to have it. And that is what here in the Buddhist teachings. This is very interesting, isn't it? For us, when we talk about if we say, yeah, I went on a holiday, amazing holiday, what we'll talk how good is it, in generally speaking. Sometimes holiday goes to disaster. That's a different. And similar to that, the historical Buddha, after he years and years, in general speaking, searching for enlightenment, and then eventually he experienced enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And then after that, after his enlightenment, his first teaching, he didn't teach how much he enjoyed his enlightenment. He taught to his followers to say, there's a dukkha, there's a suffering, and that should be understood completely and fully. He didn't say there's a bliss, and that is something very significant, given in teaching in that manner. Of course, we all want to hear the good news, as a human nature. But something telling the truth is also important. Truth in the sense, saying there's a dukkha, there's a suffering. And Buddha said, it should be fully understood. Fully understood. Not just partially, not just the surface, and that is important in here. And also he said, there's the origins of dukkha. The suffering is not here accidentally, or not here without causes, not here somebody punished you. What he said, those sufferings are here because there are causes, and the causes are also within us. And in relation to the causes, they should be abandoned. They should be get rid of or eradicate. And that is really something important to reflect upon this existence that we have. At the same time, the third noble truth, Buddha said, the dukkha and the origins of dukkha, which is at the moment, they are part of our existence, part of our life, but these can be completely eradicated. In that case, the third noble truth, the complete cessation. The cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering should be, what Buddha said, should be experienced, should be actualized. And again, it is here within us. And then fourth noble truth, Buddha said, again, that cessation, that extinction of suffering and origins of suffering will take place within us, but without any causes. It will take place within us with the causes, and the causes are, and in the fourth noble truth that Buddha taught, the noble eightfold paths. And that is very profound teachings. So in this case, cultivation In here, Tsongkhapa explained in a one verse. But if you reflect on, study, meditate, learn Buddha's first teachings, this first principle of the path, which is called the renunciation, will be cultivated, no doubt. Only what we are at this stage, we don't reflect on, we don't contemplate these important, profound teachings that often, we just stay in the surface. So therefore, difficult to go in the depth. So then the verse 5 is not that important. It is just saying, how can I know? If somebody asks, how can I know I have this, I have cultivated, now I've cultivated, this, the first principle of the path. And this verse 5 give us you will understand, saying, once you have this determination, very spontaneously, effortlessly, without any sort of long-term meditation. That determination is there in front of our mind. Determination wanting to be completely free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha is forefront of our mind, very naturally, effortlessly. Then you can say, I have cultivated, I have nurtured out of the three principles of the path, I have nurtured the first, the principle of the path. And this is what I will not read any detail, the verse 5, and that is the, so up to, verse, 3, 4, and 5, these three verses are dedicated by Tsongkhapa relation to the first principle of the path, that is technically called renunciation. Now that I'm going to move to the second, the principle of the path, and this verse 6. Verse 6 is, explaining why, if somebody has cultivated, if somebody has nurtured this, the first principle of the path to a path, then why we need the second principle of the path. That is the bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is very much from the Mahayana teachings point of view, from the Bodhisattva teachings point of view. Namta semjeki simbamena lame changjuto punzo dewe gyuro minjuwe londenamki changju semjoke. So even if you have cultivated this first principle of the path, that determination oneself to be completely free from suffering and the origins of suffering, if the second principle of the path, that is the altruistic awakened mind, is not present, is not nurtured within us, then the first principle of the path will lead oneself be free from suffering and the origins of suffering. That determination will not help us, not give us the strength, mental strength, determinations, or the skills to work for the sake of others. Others who are like ourselves, have a tremendous sense of yearning for the happiness, joys, fulfillment, and have a determination not to experience any form of pain and difficulties, like myself. And under that kind of situation, if we do not think, or if we do not consider working for the sake of others also be completely free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha, if we do not consider that, then it is not really, in the certain extent, not using the human potentials fully or completely, fully and completely. And for many reasons, oneself and others are closely related, closely connected, closely dependent, each other. One's happiness and all those things are dependent on others, and same as the other's happiness. So under that kind of close dependency, close connection, in that case, in that kind of situation, if we do not consider or do not have a thought for the working for the sake of others, then it is not really right or correct. And this is talking about from the Mahayana teachings point of view. And that's why this verse 6, saying, to even if you have this first principle of the path, on top of that should work to have the second principle of the path, which is the bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind. And this verse 6 is the encouraging to move in that kind of more further stage of the mind training. All these are mind training. Cultivating determination to be completely free from suffering and origins of suffering is mind training. But our mind can be trained further. Further in this case, not just oneself to be wanting to be free from suffering and the origins of suffering, but we should also train our mind to work for the sake of others to be free from suffering and the origins of suffering. And these are related to this verse 6, which is under the second principle of the path. So now we are going to move to the verse 7 and 8. So this verse 7 and 8, those two verses, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whenever he teaches in this text, he says this, the verse 7 and 8, which we are going to read, the meaning of contemplation on these two verses can be also, not only at this stage, only this cultivation of, the second principle of the path, bodhicitta, but also the meaning of these two verses are also contemplated and meditated on even in the first, while we are cultivating the first principle of the path. It's perfectly worked in both cases, both cases. The meaning, contemplation, meditation on the meaning of the verse 7 and 8, not only at this stage, not only in the stage of cultivation of bodhicitta, but it is also meditated, contemplated while we are, cultivating the first principle of the path, which he says, it works perfectly. Need to change very little, in this area. Otherwise, it's perfectly, works very well. And I thought that's really amazing advice. Amazing advice, because in the cultivation of, the first principle of the path, we have only one verse. Although the verse has a tremendous meaning, profound meaning, but if we want to elaborate a little bit, which I did to talk to you, saying to contemplate, meditate on the Four Noble Truths, to add more detail, more depth. But here, His Holiness Dalai Lama suggests, also meditate on these two verses to bring forward, meaning of meditation, contemplation, bring forward to the cultivation of the first principle of the path. And this is very, so now here, Geshe has, explained in a very, explained the situation in a very dramatic, the analogies is given. The analogy is, here, the oneself, one's own, both hands are, tightly, very tighted, behind, and put in a very, the strong sort of, whatever, I hear the term is used, iron, sort of cage, whatever, and, the throw in a river, which has a tremendous, power to carry away, and all this taking place in a dark, there's no light, and therefore the individual has no chance to be free from, because first of all, hands are, very tightly tied, therefore it's difficult to undo it, and not only hands are tied, but oneself is put in this cage, and it is not any kind of cage, it is iron cage, and not only in the iron cage, that with the cage oneself is thrown in a current. River has a tremendous power to carry away, and all these are taking place in a very, without any light, in a dark, a dark time. So that is the analogies, and here, and then the meaning here is, shukta choshi gyunji kire, dogaleji chingwa tambedam, dangzin chaki tawe bosuchu, marimumbe, machin gunetip. In Tibetan, those the first 4 lines. Shukta choshi gyunji kire. Taken away, or taken away by the 4, powerful currents. The river. Here translated in the text that we are reading is swept away by the current of the 4 powerful rivers. Here talking about 4, the 4 powerful rivers, currents of 4 powerful, talking about birth, aging, sickness, and death. These 4 events taking place, either we have a short lifetime or whether we have a long lifetime. Live 100 years or live, a few days. These all are taking place, and these all are taking place. In the we hardly have anything to say when we want and how we want anything. Cannot be stopped. And so on and so forth. And that's what here it's saying. Swept away by the current of 4 powerful rivers. So the 4 rivers referring to birth, aging, sickness, and death, and tied by the bonds of karma. So in other words, our the mental states, those afflictions, and with the afflictions, led by those afflictions like attachment, aversion, ignorance, then actions that follow, the activities of the body, speech, and mind follow. Something that we have created in last week, last month, last year, last decade, or if we say the previous, and we are sort of more or less, experiencing the consequences of those actions. We hardly have that much to say. Can't, here the term is used, so hard to undo. Once the consequences, once the results are rapid upon us, some of those actions that we have committed under attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Once the results are rapid, very, very difficult to escape, not to experience those results. And that's what here saying Then third line, caught in the iron net of self-grasping. So it is not we are experiencing this the results, but these results are led by this self-grasping. Here the term is used, self-grasping. Self-grasping can be looked at into two categories, two levels. As you can see in the next line, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance. So self-grasping, the self-grasping of person and the self-grasping of phenomena. In that sense, we can look at two levels of self-grasping, or ignorance. Ignorance can be looked at two layers or two levels. The ignorance of the self-grasping and the ignorance of self-grasping of phenomena. So these are more technical, philosophical explanation. In other words, the ignorance, the iron net, or the caught in the iron net of self-grasping. So this, our self-grasping, believing, thinking, perceiving that I or the self as some kind of intrinsic, inherent entity or nature within this mind and body or outside this mind and body, self-grasping. And that is the root, as I mentioned earlier, the three poisons: attachment, aversion, and ignorance. When you put together, the attachment and aversion, they arise, they occur due to the self-grasping, And the self-grasping can be looked at into two levels. One is, as I mentioned, so these two lines, self-grasping in the third line, and saying the darkness of ignorance is in the fourth line. The darkness of the ignorance is the most subtle, what sometimes translated the fundamental ignorance, or ignorance of self-grasping, fundamental ignorance of self-grasping. So in other words, looking at the individual's situation, mainly the individual's mental situation, going through tremendous sense of difficulties, and very difficult to overcome those when those results are rapid, and these situations are very much rooted within the mental state, and mental states are self-grasping and fundamental ignorance. And looking at that, seeing in that kind of nature, understanding in that kind of nature, if we use that upon oneself, upon one's own situation, that will help to cultivate determination, oneself to be free from suffering. Or if you contemplate that kind of nature to the other living beings who are similar situation as ourselves, that will help to cultivate this altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta. And that's what here,
Then the next verse 8, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings. So endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, which I mentioned earlier, birth, aging, sickness, and death. We hardly have anything to say. These are occurring constantly, continuously. So this is what he has endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and pervasive suffering. We are able to acknowledge, we are able to understand, we are able to see the suffering of suffering as a suffering. And we try, utilize, the means and methods to overcome. But very often we misunderstand the second layers of suffering, which is called suffering of change. Initially, things and events appear to us as attractive, as desirable, as useful, helpful, and when we have it, when we have them, when we spend time, then changes, they become undesirable, they become unattractive, they become valueless, worthless, then we want to run away from them, want to keep distance. That layers of suffering, many of us don't see as a suffering initially. Only when time passes, then we may able to see. And third layers of suffering, which is called pervasive suffering. That layers of suffering, many of us have no idea as a suffering. Instead, we may see as a very, very desirable, very, very attractive. And that's what here, they're saying, ceaselessly tormented by three sufferings, thinking that all mothers, all living beings, mothers or all living beings, are in such condition, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. So if you change the third line, thinking that upon oneself, instead of all mothers, as such mothers, instead of mothers saying oneself is in such condition, that will help to cultivate determination, that first principle of the path. The first principle of the path, which is the renunciation. So this first, the 6 lines in these verse 7, first 4 lines, and verse 8, first 2 lines, these first 6 lines, when we contemplate the meaning of these first 6 lines, upon oneself, according to His Holiness Dalai Lama's advice, if we reflect upon oneself, that will help to cultivate, to develop, cultivate determination, oneself to be free from samsara. If you apply these meaning of these 6 lines upon other living beings, other living creatures, then that will help to cultivate the second principle of the path, which is the bodhicitta. And this is what, the extremely useful reflection or contemplation to cultivate these first two principles of the path. Okay. So then the verse, this here, the 8a, which is put it, similar to to when this mind, when this, the altruistic awakened mind, when this determination, wanting to help all living beings, wanting to work for the sake of all living beings, when that mind become part of our way of thinking,
our way of feeling, our way of experiencing, then we can say the second principle of the path. The bodhicitta is what you call the accomplished. And this is not in this, this is added in, by the translator, in this case, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It is not in the original text. This marked with 8a, which is not in the original Tsongkhapa's text. This is added by Lama Zopa. But the meaning is that, it is to, when this determination to want to help, want to work for the sake of all living beings, for their well-being, when that mind's become part of our way of thinking, living, experiencing, and become very spontaneous, then bodhicitta, the second principal aspect of the path, is experienced. So that is this, the meaning of that verse 8a, which is not in the original text. Okay, now I will leave it here, and the next Wednesday, hopefully we'll manage to finish the remaining text, which is the third principle of the path, realization of emptiness. So it is already almost, it's already 20 to 9. I may take one or two questions if you have questions. You want to have a question? Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe. What is the best form to start to practice renunciation?
Renunciation.
Yes.
While we are peacefully, blissfully sleeping in the bed. When, if you ask when, or
what is the best form?
Right here and now.
Like if the practice needs to go gradually, what is the best form to start?
Yes, I think it is important. These are, as I mentioned right at the beginning, last Wednesday, and also today repeated again. The text is written to a great master, a Buddhist master. So the writer, Tsongkhapa, is fully aware of the text, the person that he is sending this text. The person, the receiver is really highly sort of trained master. So for us at this stage, immediately jumping according to the text might be too hard, too difficult. So gradual training, stage by stage, training is extremely useful. But same time, not forgetting the long term or not forgetting the long term goal. Although the long term goals might be quite far away from us at this stage, but not forgetting that while we are working right here and now. While we are taking small steps, same time not forgetting where our destination, if you follow closely according to the text. Okay? Another question? There is? Okay, that's good. One of my teachers used to say, if there's no question, sorry? Two possibilities. Yeah, you are right, Mika. Two possibilities. One is have understood everything. Second is haven't understood anything. That's one of my teachers used to say that. Anyway, so we'll stop here. So conclusion, the page 28, preface to 21 paras. Om je tse ma pa ma dro ma la cha tse lo Chanza Doma Nyuma Pamo, Chene Geche Lodan Tama, Jigden Sungun Chuji Sheki, Kesa Jewa Lene Choma, Chanze Tonge Tawa Gundo, Kawa Jene Zigbe Shema, Kama Tonda Soba Namgi, Rabdo Chewe Rabama, Chanze Sengu Chuni Jeje, Peme Chane Nambara Jema, Jemba Zundu Kadu Shewa, Soba Samden Junima, Chanze Deshin Sheve Zodo, Tae Nambara Jawa Jema, Malu Paro Jimba Tobe, Jawe Seji Shindu Dema, Chanze Duda Rahon Yike, Duda Choda Namga Kama, Jigden Dumbo Shabdi Nende, Luba Meba Guba Chanze Jajin Mela Tsamba, Lungla Natso Wanju Jombo Rola Tisa Namda, Nujun Soji Dune Dema, Chanze Deje Chadang Peje, Paro Chugo Rabdo Joma, Egon Yunja Shabki Nende, Meba Chuba Shindo Bama, Chanze Ture Jiba Deje Pao Nambara Joma, Chuje Shene Tonye Denze, Tao Tamje Malus, Chanze Gunjo Sumze Chaje, Seme Toga Nambara Jema, Malu Choje Kolo Jembe, Ranje Veje Sonama Choma, Chanze Rabdo Gawa Jebe, Ojen Veje Tenwa Bema, Sheba Rabshe Duda Raye, Duda Jigden Wandu Zema, Chanze Sashi Kyongwe Tsona, Tamje Guba Numa Nyema, Chonye Yewa Yike Honge, Pongba Tamje Nambara Choma, Chanze Dawe Dumbu Oje, Jemba Tamje Shindo Bama, Rebe Chene Weba, Tabra Shindo Werava Zema, Chanze Kebe Tama Meda, Barwe Tingwe Wune, Eja Yungum Kune Koke, Jaye Pune Nambara Choma, Chanze Sashi Ngola Chake, Tilji Nujin Shabji Doma, Chonye Jenze Yige Honge, Rimba Dumbu Namni Gema, Chanze Dema Gema Shema, Nyangen Deshin Ju Nyema, Soa Omda Yanda Dembe, Digba Chenpo Jomba Nyema, Chanze Kune Korawa Kawe, Tae Lune Nambara Gema, Ige Jube Ngani Gobe, Rigba Honle Joma Nyema, Chanze Dure Shamni Dabe, Honge Nambe Sabe Nyema, Rira Menda Radan Beje, Jigden Sumna Yewa Nyema, Chanze Lai Tsoe Nambe, Rida Dajen Chana Nama, Tara Niju Peje Yege, Duna Malu Bane Sema, Chanze Lai Tsonam Gebo, Hada Miam Ji Dema, Gune Goja Gawa Jide, Zeda Melawa Ngeba Sema, Chanze Nima Dawa Jebe, Jini Bola Verva Sema, Hara Niju Dudarai, Shindo Chakbe Rimne Sema, Chanze Tini Sumnam Gobe, Shive Tuda Yanda Dema, Duda Rola Niju Zonam, Jomba Dure Rapcho Nima, Zawe Ngaji Deba Deda, Chanze Wane Niju Za. Dedications in the last page. Chanjo Semcho Remboche Maje Panam Je Juroche Jeba Nyamba Meba Yang Kone Kondo Pewasho Tobze Changshin Jamgun Jawede Zengyon Pewe kunsu topo tse, choson kuwe, lengme tojo ba, daso duje, gundo shabden, kare rawe, korwe shinkamde, penda dewa, malu jongwe ne, chere sewa, tenzen jazo ye, shabe sede, pado tengyo. Oh yeah. Thank you.